Hey everybody, this is Spoonie, and the Factorio 2.0 expansion titled Space Age has been in development for years. With plenty of rumors about its release, we were finally given an official release date back in July of October 21st of 2024. So let's take a look at everything we know about Factorio 2.0 Space Age. First off, this is not a standalone game. It's not Factorio 2. Although it adds as much content as a sequel, it's a DLC or expansion. So you will need to own the base game in order to play it. The cost of this will be the same as the base game at $35, but I have no doubt that they will include some kind of bundle that will give those who don't already own the base game a chance to pick up both at a discount. But if you do already own the original Factorio, then Space Age is going to cost you an additional $35, which is the same price as the original base game, but I think that's reasonable. Factorio at $35 is an absolute bargain considering how much time the average player pours into this game. And the amount of content the expansion adds is basically an entire second game, with the developers claiming as much as 100 additional hours of play. And that's if you just press your way through it, which means you'll get 10 times that as you try to optimize your factory along the way. The developers brought on several popular modders to add 3 official and separate mods that can be turned on or off individually once you own the expansion. So you can change the game's mechanics based on how you want to spend the next several hundred hours of your life trying to create the most efficient factory possible. Those mods are Space Age, Quality, and Elevated Rails. First, let's look at Elevated Rails because it's the most obvious in terms of what it does. It adds a third dimension that you can utilize when building out your rail systems. This is probably my favorite new feature that both simplifies and complicates rail systems. This will allow players to build more direct routes to specific or sometimes temporary locations like mining outposts, while not having to undertake the often daunting task of working through rail signals and intersections. At least, maybe not as often. I know some people seem to have rail signals totally figured out, but somehow even after hundreds of hours of playing this game, I still have to reread some tutorials before I can get mine running exactly the way I want them. I mean, just look at this post from September of 2023 explaining the changes they are making in 2.0 just to make S-bends work a little better. This is dedication to a game that we frankly don't see very often from developers, not years after release anyway. By the way, this rail update for the shapes of the rails, along with several other updates, are being added for free to the 2.0 release of Factorio alongside the release of the expansion. So even if you don't buy the expansion, you'll still have some updates to look forward to. The elevated rails are exclusively part of the expansion though, and also come with an updated version of the rail planner which will automatically connect to whatever rail you point it to. So if you're trying to connect your elevated rails back down to the ground but just can't seem to get it to fit, that shouldn't be a problem even in crowded spaces thanks to the planner. And the artwork for these look really amazing. All of the new artwork for this expansion is exceptional, but the elevated rails are probably one of the trickier aesthetics to pull off because you'd want to create something that has the brute force chunkiness of an industrial factory, but still something that doesn't obstruct too much of your view since they will often be winding through your factory. And they absolutely nailed it. The industrial feel is there with the signals and the support platforms, but then the rails themselves are see-through, but still look like they could actually support a train thanks to the addition of those guardrails. Hats off to everybody who worked on this, amazing job as usual with the artwork. I am personally looking forward to the whole new level of spaghetti that I will inevitably end up with for a factory, that I can then spend hours later trying to untangle when I'm ready to expand. Or maybe I'll just build off to the side like I always do. The elevated rails can be built over anything that isn't considered a tall entity, such as rocket silos, roboports, and large electric poles. Signals can also be attached to the elevated rails, and you'll need to make sure you leave room for their support structures so there won't be any 10-mile-long floating rails. The elevated rail support structures can also be built over water, which opens up a whole lot of new opportunities for island factories which are finally truly isolated from biters. Although one question I had was whether or not biters will be able to walk along the elevated rails if they have access to the ramps. It seems like they should be able to. After all, if it can support a train, it can definitely support some biters. I wasn't able to find answers to this specific question, so we'll just have to wait for release to test it. Again, this mod can be individually toggled on or off, so if you'd like to play the vanilla game with elevated rails and no Space Age content, then that's absolutely possible. The next mod included in this expansion is Quality. This mod is going to add an insane level of complexity to your factories, as different quality items can be produced which give bonuses depending on what the item is. With this mod, every item, entity, and piece of equipment will have 5 levels of quality that can be achieved, and each tier will provide bonuses. Normal will have no bonus, uncommon will have a 30% bonus, rare 60%, epic 90%, and finally, legendary will have a whopping 150% bonus for most items. Some examples of things that are outlined in the blog post made about the quality feature back in September of 2023 explains that all higher quality entities have more health, but apart from that, they have other bonuses based on their type. Specifically, they mention electric poles have larger supply areas and wire reach. Equipment is generally better at what it does, turrets and guns have more range, ammo does more damage, inserters move faster, mining drills deplete resources slower, assembling machines, furnaces, labs are all faster, worker robots have larger battery capacity and roboports will recharge them faster, solar panels will produce more energy, accumulators will have larger battery capacity, and nuclear reactors, boilers, steam engines all have increased production. Basically, everything at a higher level will do whatever it does, just that much better. So you can imagine how quickly a level 3 assembler machine with 4 legendary productivity modules will produce whatever you need. This is going to make factories way more efficient and compact, at least once you actually have the legendary equipment. But getting those higher tiers of equipment is a whole other challenge. To change the quality of your output, you'll need to create quality modules. Those modules will give your assemblers or anything else you place them in a chance to produce items of increased quality. But there are no guarantees. Every item produced only has a slim chance of being a higher quality item, with those chances decreasing as the quality goes up. So you'll have to create massive amounts of lower quality items and sort out the higher quality items as they're produced. But if you have higher level quality modules along with higher quality materials, the chances of you producing high quality or even legendary quality items goes up. To deal with the fact that you will now inevitably be creating massive amounts of normal quality items in pursuit of perfection, a new building is being introduced called the Recycler, which does exactly what you think it does. This will recycle all of the now trash tier normie items back into base materials to be used again for another chance at perfection. Using this building, players will eventually be able to create production lines specifically for higher tier items, as we simply recycle anything that isn't the quality we're looking for back into its base materials to feed them back into the assembler once again. And although at first the recycler will only give back 25% of your materials, you can get that number up to 100% by using modules, so item quality really is a mid to late game luxury. And that's the way it's meant to be. As not all tiers are immediately accessible, unlocking epic and legendary modules will require research that can only be obtained through traveling to the new planets. So you will really need to prioritize what production in your factory needs a boost once you're able to focus on item quality over quantity. Producing legendary items is really costly and should likely be saved for your space platforms to begin with, as space is limited and the platforms are costly. The developers also note that the quality of items will also change the calculus for interplanetary logistics. At first, it might make more sense to create items locally before you ramp up quality production, but later, as the cost of transportation changes, it may be more efficient to import and export specific materials. Obviously, you'll now be able to filter items based on their quality as well. If you don't initially see anything related to quality, that's because it's invisible until you unlock quality modules through research. Then you'll get access to the drop-down menus and other quality features to start setting up those functions. As was stated in development blogs, this is clearly a mid to late game feature that is definitely going to be a resource sink, but it does add a whole new level of optimization and complexity to the game. And finally, the real meat and potatoes of this expansion is the Space Age mod content, which adds space travel, orbital platforms, asteroids, custom-built ships, as well as 4 new planets with all new mechanics, items, production, and research. So let's start by taking a look at the 4 new planets: Fulgora, Vulcanus, Aquilla, and Gleba. Gleba? I'm gonna say Gleba. The first is Fulgora, a planet that appears desolate, but the remains of a maybe ancient civilization can be found scattered around the world. I honestly love this because it will probably deepen the lore of Factorio a bit. My assumption is that there's going to be some Easter eggs to find on this planet, but if there's not, it's still really cool to see some additional assets to build around and explore. Fulgora is a planet of plateaus which act just like islands for the oil-rich sands between them. You can walk across the darker sand terrain, but you can't build on it except for the elevated rail platforms and offshore pumps. Because you will be limited in connected space, you'll have to be fairly compact with your factories on this planet, which will probably make it an ideal place to start using your quality parts once they're acquired. But it will also be a planet of extensive rail networks connecting your plateaus. On Fulgora, the evening skies are filled with storms and lightning will repeatedly strike the planet's surface, but during the day, the weather is calm. This makes starting out on the planet difficult as your factory is going to get struck and damaged by the storms. But if you are careful about where you start building, there are abandoned alien lightning rods on the planet that attract the lightning. So building near one of those for your first few days on the ground might be a good idea. This is an oil-rich planet with high energy output from the nightly storms. Eventually, you'll be building lightning rods and collecting energy from the strikes. It's not clear if you'll be able to research those lightning rods prior to landing on the planet, but my guess is probably not. Next is Aquilla, which as the name suggests is an unforgiving ocean world with no land, where survival will depend on your ability to harness heat, manage resources, and build atop a sea of liquid ammonia. The only building platforms are icebergs, and resources on Aquilla are extremely limited. This planet is basically Frostpunk meets Factorio. The biggest obstacle to overcome here is going to be heat, as most of your industrial buildings will freeze without it and stop functioning if they're not warmed properly. So you'll need heating towers and nuclear reactors to generate enough heat to keep things running. This is a really interesting planet which will no doubt be one of the more challenging obstacles to overcome, as heat pipes can't be placed underground, and your builds must balance heat, belts, and pipes, creating intricate logistical puzzles to solve. Heat can travel through connected pipes, but every building you warm consumes a little more of it, meaning long distances can lead to heat loss, so you'll need to manage your heat sources carefully. As mentioned, Aquilla is scarce in resources. You'll rely on crude oil, lithium brine, and fluorine gas, which bubble up from the depths. Solar power is practically non-existent, only 1% of what you'd find on other planets, so efficient energy use is critical and nuclear power is really your best bet here. You won't be able to build on the oceans, so you'll need to harvest ice from the surrounding waters to extend your platforms. As you progress, you'll unlock powerful new technologies like cryogenics and quantum processors. These are essential for crafting fusion reactors and other advanced equipment that will help you survive on the planet. And when it comes to defense, Aquilla is where you're going to get the research necessary for the new railgun turret, a high-powered weapon with range of 40 tiles and damage output that starts at 10,000. But be careful, the railgun fires in a straight line and can damage anything along its path, including your own structures. It also sounds really satisfying to fire. It needs a lot of power though, and also has to be fed ammunition to function, so setting these up probably won't be as simple as other turrets. Despite the lack of enemies, Aquilla will probably be one of the most time-consuming planets to build on due to these space limitations and need for complex heat logistics. But at least you won't have to contend with biters or other baddies while you set things up. The next planet is Vulcanus, which is kind of like Mustafar for Star Wars fans, and is also one of the first planets you will likely travel to once you venture out into the stars. This planet is primarily a metallurgy planet with ample mining of coal and some new resources like tungsten and calcite, which is apparently only useful once you combine it with other things like sulfuric acid, which you can also conveniently get from geysers on this planet rather than needing to refine it back on Novus. The planet is scattered with lava lakes and even has some new enemies to overcome. There are multiple new biomes to explore along with sulfuric acid fissures and sulfur puddles. While lava starts out as an obstacle on this planet, it quickly becomes pivotal to your factory and will be a valuable resource. From the lava, you'll be able to extract iron, copper, and stone, as well as using the lava itself for metallurgy and energy production. Vulcanus has a mountainous terrain along with some flat areas in the ashlands biome, which will be your ideal building sites due to the density of the coal. The sulfur fields won't be much use aside from small mining outposts, as the geysers will obstruct any attempts at organization or expansion. This planet looks amazing. During the development, there was a focus on keeping this planet interesting even if you removed the lava. The developers didn't want to create just another generic lava planet, and honestly, I think they once again absolutely hit the mark. I love the idea of making it mountainous with different biomes changing as you descend the mountain. Having the sulfur and lava in their own biomes while also showing that the planet has a history of vegetation through the dense coal fields and ashlands biome is just a really nice touch. Vulcanus is also home to some ancient creatures that remind me of the movie Tremors, which by the way is an awesome movie franchise if you like intentionally bad movies. It is literally the best movie Kevin Bacon ever made, so watch it if you haven't, all of them. They're all great. The creatures are called demolishers, and they are large, segmented enemies that come in various sizes and control different territories on the planet. If you build in one of those territories, you will anger the creature and it will start to rampage through your factory and claim back its lands. Once you have defeated the creature, which is no easy task, the territory becomes yours, permanently. Defeating the enemy creatures is the only way to claim areas on Vulcanus, and these creatures won't wade into territories that have already been captured. Although they will follow you back to different territories if you attack them and try to run, so be careful where you retreat to. The creatures won't always find you in their area right away, so if you're quick, you will be able to extract some resources before they find you. And last, but probably the most infested planet aside from the world you start on, is Gleba. Gleba is a very alive planet with several new biomes consisting of various forms of fungal and planetary growth. The planet is essentially a sprawling, ankle-deep swamp with lush, mist-covered wetlands filled with alien ecosystems. Gleba also introduces agriculture to Factorio, where players will need to use automated planters to cultivate the planet's useful biological products. Instead of the traditional oil-based processes used on other planets, Gleba's resources allow players to replace oil processing with biologically derived alternatives through the biochamber, which is a new building introduced in the expansion. This building is central to Gleba's gameplay as it processes the planet's organic matter into useful products. A key challenge on Gleba is the introduction and management of spoilage, which is a new mechanic introduced in the expansion. Biological products, such as the fruits harvested from Gleba's plants, are perishable. So if they aren't processed quickly, they will rot, leading to waste that'll clog up your conveyor belts and reduce production efficiency. This forces players to focus on high throughput rather than just output. The constant interaction with Gleba's ecology adds a layer of complexity to factory building. Players are not just dealing with the mechanical and technological aspects of their factories, but now they're also dealing with the living, breathing ecosystem around them. But perhaps the most intriguing part of Gleba are the pentapods, which are the enemies introduced on the planet. Pentapods come in three main forms: wrigglers, strafers, and stompers. When you first encounter these, they might seem manageable, but if you're not prepared, they can quickly overwhelm you. The wrigglers are fragile but deadly in large numbers, and strafers are fast, ranged attackers that shoot out other wrigglers, which then attack you on their own. Strafers are really mobile and outrange most turrets, so dealing with them is a challenge. Finally, the stompers, which are massive, tanky beasts which can also absorb huge amounts of damage. They have devastating splash damage attacks, making densely packed defenses vulnerable, plus stompers and strafers can also walk right over your walls. On Gleba, pollution works differently also. Your agricultural activities create spores and aromas that attract the pentapods. So the more you meddle with the environment, the more aggressive and evolved these enemies will become. Pentapod and biter eggs can also now be harvested. Once you've managed to collect enough bioflux on Gleba, you can create capture robots. These new units/buildings allow you to take control of spawners back on your starting planet of Novice as well as on Gleba and harvest biter and pentapod eggs. The part about this that I find really interesting is the spoilage mechanic in combination with harvesting eggs. When the pentapod and biter eggs spoil, they hatch. That means that if there's a breakdown in your factory or your throughput isn't high enough, you may end up infesting your own factory with angry enemies. But since groups of enemies reproduce and create new spawners, does this mean that we could take a large number of biter eggs off-world and infest other planets with biters and pentapods? Could pentapods then become an invasive species on our starting planet? This is something they haven't directly addressed, at least not from what I've seen, and it is literally the first thing I'm going to test as soon as I have a factory capable of transporting eggs off-world. As I said, this expansion is absolutely massive, and honestly puts a lot of other expansions and DLCs to shame. Factorio is one of my favorite games of all time, and with this expansion, along with the focus on making modding easier and more accessible, there is only going to be more great content to enjoy after release from this amazing community. What part of the Factorio expansion are you looking forward to the most? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more gaming news and development updates. Or just check out my weekly sales videos to help you find new games to try out at deep discounts. Don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps my channel, and if you want to stay up to date on gaming news and developments, make sure you subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.